The wind howled its ancient song across the desolate Alaskan expanse, a mournful dirge echoing the solitude of Elias Thorne. Late autumn had bled into an unforgiving winter, painting the vast landscape in shades of white and grey. Each breath was a visible plume in the frigid air, a stark reminder of the biting cold that gnawed at flesh and bone. Elias, a man etched by years of hardship and a grief he carried like a phantom limb, trudged through the knee-deep snow, his breath rasping in his chest. His wolf-hide parka, a testament to his prowess and survival, offered little comfort against the relentless onslaught of the elements. He was a silhouette against the endless white, a solitary figure in a world that seemed determined to swallow him whole. His eyes, keen and practiced, scanned the frozen terrain for any sign of game, for the flicker of a hare or the lumbering gait of a moose. Survival here wasn't a choice. It was a daily, brutal negotiation with nature. The memory of his lost family, a pain that had dulled but never vanished, was his constant companion, a silent weight in his gut. He clutched at the leather pouch around his neck. Inside it, his mother's ring, a smooth, worn silver band, his last tangible link to a life that felt 1,000 years away. A sudden, sharp gust of wind ripped through the valley, stinging his eyes and forcing him to instinctively seek shelter. He spotted a dark crevice in the face of a towering glacier, a jagged maw in the crystalline ice. It was a risky move, but the blizzard was intensifying, threatening to blind him completely. He pushed forward, seeking refuge from the maelstrom. As he drew closer, a faint, almost imperceptible sound reached him, carried on the wind. Not the shriek of the wind or the groan of the ice, but something softer, weaker. A human sound. Cautiously, rifle at the ready, Elias peered into the icy maw. The air within was still, strangely silent compared to the fury outside. His eyes, accustomed to the low light of the wilderness, slowly adjusted to the gloom. And then he saw her, a huddled form, barely discernible against the blue-white ice, skeletal and still. A woman, barely clinging to life, her eyes wide and unfocused, fixed on some unseen horror or distant memory. Her lips were cracked, her skin translucent, a testament to prolonged starvation. The sight struck him with a force he hadn't felt in years, a jolt of something akin to primal fear, then a flicker of a long-buried human instinct. He had found her, a fragile ember in the heart of the ice. The silence in the glacier cave was heavy, broken only by Elias's ragged breathing and the faint, shallow gasps from the woman. She was barely there, a whisper of life against the vast indifference of the ice. Elias, a man hardened by years of solitary survival, felt an unfamiliar tremor in his hands. He'd faced grizzlies, blizzards, and starvation without flinching, but this fragile, suffering human stirred something deep within him, a forgotten echo of compassion. He knelt beside her, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Her exposed skin was ashen, mottled with frostbite. He could feel the cold radiating from her small frame. He pulled off his thickest mitten, reaching out a hesitant hand to touch her wrist. Her pulse was a faint, irregular flutter, a bird's wing about to give out. She shivered violently, a convulsion that racked her emaciated body, and a low, guttural moan escaped her lips. "Hello?" he rasped, his voice rough from disuse. There was no response, only that vacant stare. He knew he had to act, and quickly. Leaving her here was a death sentence. Carrying her through the blizzard back to his distant cabin would be a monumental task, but it was her only chance. He unslung his pack, pulling out a small flask of diluted spirits and a piece of dried venison. He tried to offer her the flask, but her lips wouldn't part. Carefully, he uncorked it, dripping a few drops onto her parched lips, hoping it would rehydrate and warm her. He then tore a small strip of the venison, placing it gently near her mouth. Her eyes, though still unfocused, seemed to track the movement. He spoke softly, not expecting a reply but needing to ground himself. "You're safe. I'm taking you to my cabin. Just hold on." It was a slow, agonizing process. He carefully lifted her, wrapping her in his spare blanket, feeling the shocking lightness of her body. He struggled to balance her weight and his rifle, navigating the treacherous footing of the ice cave. Each step was a gamble against the slick surface. Finally, he emerged from the icy moor, the blizzard still raging, a white wall of wind and snow. The journey to his cabin, a distant speck in the vast wilderness, would be the longest and most difficult of his life. But as he looked down at the fragile woman cradled in his arms, a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He wouldn't let her die. Not now. Not after he'd found her. The fire in Elias's cabin roared, its warmth a tangible comfort against the brutal cold outside. Anya lay on his makeshift cot, wrapped in furs, her breathing still shallow, but more regular. Elias watched her, a silent sentinel, his rifle propped beside the hearth. He had managed to get some warm broth down her throat, a spoonful at a time, and the faint flush of color on her cheeks was a welcome sight. Her eyes, though still clouded, held a little more awareness now. He didn't know anything about her. Her clothes were tattered, offering no clues to her origins. Her hands, when he'd carefully peeled off the frozen remnants of her gloves, were raw and blistered. She was a ghost from the ice, a mystery delivered by the storm. He wondered what circumstances could have led a woman to be stranded in such a desolate and unforgiving place, left to starve in a glacier cave. The thought gnawed at him, stirring a quiet unease. Days blurred into a routine of survival and tentative care. Elias hunted, setting snares and checking his traps, always returning to the cabin with an almost desperate urgency. He brought back fresh game, carefully preparing small portions for Anya, coaxing her to eat. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to recover. The hollows in her cheeks filled out a fraction, and a fragile strength returned to her limbs. One frigid afternoon, as Elias was sharpening his knife by the fire, Anya stirred. Her eyes, clearer now, met his. "Where am I?" Her voice was a dry whisper, raspy from disuse. Elias lowered his knife. "My cabin, in the Wrangell Mountains." She frowned, her brow furrowing in concentration. "My name, I don't—" She trailed off, a look of frustration crossing her face. "I don't remember." Elias nodded, understanding. He'd half expected it. "It's all right. Take your time." He offered her a cup of warm water. She took it with trembling hands, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. A moment later, a sharp gasp escaped her. She dropped the cup, her hands flying to her temples. "Anya!" she breathed, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "My name is Anya." It was a small victory, a fragile spark of memory in the vast darkness, but it was a beginning. Elias watched her, a knot of something he couldn't name tightening in his chest. With the return of her name, Anya's memories began to surface, though in fragmented, often confusing flashes. She'd wake from restless sleep, gasping, recalling images of a crowded ship, the cold spray of the ocean, and then the crushing weight of snow. She remembered fear, a pervasive, chilling fear that still clung to her like a shroud. But the crucial details, who she was with, why she was there, how she ended up in the glacier cave, remained stubbornly out of reach, like words on the tip of her tongue. Elias listened, offering a quiet presence, never pressing her. He continued his daily routine of hunting and maintaining the cabin, but now a subtle shift had occurred. His solitude was no longer absolute. Anya's presence, though still fragile, had filled a void he hadn't realized existed. He found himself thinking of her, adjusting his hunting routes to ensure he was never too far from the cabin, returning with a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. One evening, as the northern lights painted the sky in an ethereal dance of green and purple, Anya sat by the fire, her gaze distant. "I remember a city," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Big buildings and people. They spoke a different language." Elias grunted. "Could be any number of places. Seattle, Vancouver, even Juneau, maybe." He watched her face, searching for a flicker of recognition. She shook her head, a troubled look on her face. "No, it was different, colder, and there were men, dangerous men." A shiver ran through her, despite the warmth of the fire. They were looking for something, or someone. Her eyes met his, wide and filled with a raw fear. "They were looking for me." The confession hung heavy in the air, a new layer of mystery settling over the cabin. Elias felt a prickle of unease. He had faced the wilderness, but human danger was a different beast entirely. His quiet life had been shattered, and now he had a responsibility he hadn't sought. Yet as he looked at Anya, at the haunted look in her eyes, he felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. He wouldn't let anyone harm her. He picked up a piece of kindling, tossing it into the flames. The fire crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the chilling revelation. The wilderness was vast, but it wasn't always a sanctuary. The revelation of Anya's pursuers cast a long shadow over the small cabin. Elias, usually unfazed by external threats, now moved with a heightened sense of vigilance. His patrols around the cabin extended further, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line, not just for game, but for any sign of human intrusion. The remote nature of his home was its greatest defense, but the idea of unknown men, dangerous men, hunting Anya, filled him with a quiet fury. Anya, despite her growing physical strength, remained emotionally fragile. The fragmented memories of her pursuers would often trigger bouts of anxiety, leaving her pale and withdrawn. Elias found himself instinctively comforting her, a gentle hand on her shoulder, a reassuring word. These small gestures, alien to his solitary nature, began to forge an unspoken bond between them. She, in turn, began to observe him, learning his routines, anticipating his needs. She started helping with chores, mending his worn clothes with surprising skill, and even managed to improve the taste of his monotonous meals. One afternoon, as a fresh blanket of snow fell silently, Elias returned from his trap lines. He'd found a single, distinct boot print near the frozen stream, too large for an animal, too regular for a random wanderer. It was fresh. His heart pounded in his chest, a primal drumbeat of alarm. He covered the print with snow, obscuring it. Entering the cabin, his eyes immediately went to Anya. She was kneading dough for bread, a domestic scene that felt out of place with the sudden threat. "We have company," he stated, his voice low, devoid of emotion. Anya froze, her hands still in the dough, her face drained of color. "They found me?" "A single track," Elias clarified, grabbing his rifle. "Could be anyone, but we'll assume the worst. We prepare." He moved with deliberate speed, securing the cabin, checking the locks and loading extra ammunition. He explained his plan. They would remain vigilant, observing, and if necessary, retreat to a hidden cache he had prepared deeper in the mountains. Anya, surprisingly, didn't panic. Her initial shock gave way to a steely resolve he hadn't seen before. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady. Elias looked at her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. This fragile woman, once on the brink of death, was now facing her past with a quiet strength. The snow continued to fall, burying the tracks, but the threat remained, a cold presence pressing in on their isolated sanctuary. The game had changed. Their survival now depended not just on battling the wilderness, but on outsmarting the shadows that pursued Anya. The tension in the cabin became a palpable thing, a taut string vibrating with every creak of the wood, every gust of wind. Days bled into a vigilant routine, each sunrise bringing a renewed sense of unease. Elias maintained his patrols, now extending them even further, his senses acutely attuned to any anomaly in the vast, silent wilderness. India, too, became an invaluable set of eyes and ears, her instincts sharpening as the threat loomed. Her memories, once fragmented, began to coalesce, driven by the urgency of their situation. She recalled more details of the ship, the faces of the men, and the chilling reason for their pursuit. It was not just her they sought, but something she carried, or rather, something she knew. A secret, buried deep within her subconscious, that held immense value to desperate men. She remembered hushed conversations, maps, and a specific name, the Gold Rush Syndicate. "They weren't just looking for me," Anya confided one evening, her voice barely a whisper as she huddled closer to the fire. "They were looking for the coordinates. My father, he was a prospector. He found a rich vein, hidden deep in a remote valley. He entrusted the map, or the location, to me, before they killed him." Her voice broke, the raw grief evident in her eyes. "They thought I had the physical map. I don't, but I remember the sequence, the landmarks. It's all in my head." Elias listened, his face grim, a hidden gold mine. The Alaskan wilderness was rife with such tales, but few held the chilling ring of truth as Anya's did. The ruthless nature of the Gold Rush Syndicate was well known among independent prospectors and trappers, men who would stop at nothing for a fortune. This explained their relentless pursuit. Anya wasn't just a survivor, she was a living, breathing map to untold riches. "They'll come," Elias stated, his voice flat, "for the gold and for you." Anya nodded, her eyes resolute. "I know, but I won't let them have it, not after what they did to my father." A profound silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Elias looked at Anya, at the courage shining through her fear. He had found a woman on the brink of death, and now he was tied to her by a shared peril, a dangerous secret. The harsh wilderness suddenly felt less threatening than the human greed that was rapidly approaching. They were no longer just surviving. They were preparing for a battle, a desperate fight for their lives and for the memory of her father. The threads of Anya's past had finally unraveled, revealing a dangerous tapestry that now enveloped them both. The snow deepened, blanketing the Alaskan wilderness in a thick, insulating layer, but the chill that permeated the cabin was not from the cold outside. It was the icy grip of anticipation, the knowledge that their time was running out. Anya's memories, now fully restored, painted a clear picture of the syndicate's ruthlessness. She recalled her father's desperate final instructions, the hurried whispers of landmarks and coordinates, a desperate attempt to protect his discovery and his daughter from the avarice of men. Elias and Anya spent their days preparing. He taught her how to handle his spare rifle, its weight awkward in her hands at first, but she learned with a fierce determination. They practiced silent movements through the snow, identifying potential ambush points around the cabin. Elias restocked their emergency provisions, packing light but essential supplies for a possible retreat. He showed Anya the location of his hidden cache, a small camouflage dugout packed with food, extra ammunition, and a small, sturdy sled, a last resort in case their cabin was compromised. Anya, despite her growing competence, still grappled with the emotional weight of her past. Nights were often restless, filled with nightmares of her father's final moments, of the syndicate's cruel faces. Elias would be there, a steady, silent presence by her side, offering what comfort he could. Their bond had deepened, forged in the crucible of shared danger. He no longer felt the oppressive loneliness that had defined his existence. She was a companion, a partner, and in a way he hadn't anticipated, a beacon of hope in his bleak world. One morning, the telltale sign appeared. Not just tracks, but broken branches, too high for animals, too precise to be accidental. Human signs. They were close, Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, but beneath it, a surge of defiant resolve. He would protect Anya. He would not let them take her, or the secret her father had entrusted to her. "They're here," Elias said, his voice a low rumble. Anya nodded, her eyes meeting his, no trace of panic, only a quiet determination. She knew what was at stake, the fight for survival, for her father's legacy, and for their shared future in this harsh land had begun. The vast wilderness, once their sanctuary, was about to become their battlefield. They had faced the unforgiving elements, but now they faced the unforgiving nature of man. The stillness of the Alaskan dawn was shattered by the sharp crack of a rifle shot. It wasn't aimed at the cabin, but at a distant tree, a clear warning. The syndicate had arrived. Elias, already positioned at a concealed loophole in the cabin wall, saw them. 3 figures, dark against the snow, approaching cautiously. They were armed, well-equipped, and moved with the predatory confidence of men accustomed to getting what they wanted. "Stay low," Elias murmured to Anya, who was crouched beside him, her spare rifle clutched tightly. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set. A gruff voice, amplified by the cold air, boomed across the clearing. "Thorn, we know you have her. Hand over the woman and the map, and no one gets hurt." Elias didn't respond. He waited, his finger resting lightly on the trigger of his own rifle. He knew these men wouldn't negotiate in good faith. They would take what they wanted, then silence any witnesses. Another shot rang out, this one closer, kicking up snow near the cabin wall. Elias returned fire, aiming not to kill, but to deter, to make them understand he wouldn't surrender. The sound of the shots echoed through the valley, a raw, violent intrusion on the peaceful wilderness. The confrontation became a tense standoff. The syndicate members, experienced but cautious, tried to flank the cabin, using the terrain for cover. Elias, intimately familiar with every inch of his property, anticipated their moves. Anya, despite her fear, proved to be an invaluable asset. Her sharp eyes spotted movements Elias might have missed, her warnings saving him from potential ambushes. As the day wore on, the temperature plummeted further, and a new layer of snow began to fall. The syndicate members, unused to the extreme cold and the sustained resistance, began to show signs of frustration. One of them, a burly man with a cruel face, became reckless, attempting a direct charge. Elias, a seasoned hunter, took a precise shot, hitting the ground inches from the man's foot, sending him scrambling back. "You won't break us!" Anya yelled, her voice hoarse but strong, a defiant challenge to their unseen enemies. It was a moment of pure courage, a testament to how far she had come. Elias looked at her, a profound sense of pride swelling in his chest. They were 2 against 3, but they were fighting for something more than just gold. They were fighting for their very existence, for the chance at a future unburdened by the shadows of the past. The battle for the cabin had begun, a desperate struggle against greed and violence in the unforgiving heart of the Alaskan winter. The siege continued into the twilight, the air thick with tension and the smell of gunpowder. The syndicate, growing increasingly desperate as darkness approached, intensified their assault. They tried to set fire to the lean-to Elias used for firewood, but Anya, quick thinking, managed to douse the flames with buckets of snow and water before it could take hold. Their attackers, however, were relentless, their frustration turning into reckless aggression. One of them, a wiry man with a long-barreled rifle, managed to get dangerously close to the cabin's side wall, attempting to pry open a window. Elias, moving with practiced stealth, surprised him from another angle, forcing him to retreat with a warning shot that narrowly missed his head. The syndicate members, realizing the futility of a direct assault on the fortified cabin, began to formulate a new plan. As night fully descended, painting the landscape in shades of blue and black, the air grew even colder. The wind picked up, swirling the fresh snow into blinding eddies. Elias knew this was their chance. They wouldn't be able to hold out indefinitely. He exchanged a silent glance with Anya. She understood. "We move now," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rising wind. "To the cache. They won't expect us to venture out in this." Anya nodded, her face grim but determined. They moved with practiced precision, gathering their pre-packed essentials. Elias led the way, opening a concealed trapdoor in the floor, revealing a short, narrow tunnel they had dug weeks ago, a hidden escape route designed for just such an emergency. They crawled through, emerging silently into the blizzard, the driving snow immediately obscuring their tracks. The journey to the hidden cache was grueling. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at their clothes, and the snow, now waist-deep in places, made every step an arduous battle. Elias, with Anya clinging to his back at times, pushed through the storm, his knowledge of the terrain his only guide. He could feel Anya's shivering, but she never complained, her resolve matching his. They were a single unit, two souls fighting for survival against both man and nature. Hours later, exhausted and frostbitten, they stumbled upon the concealed entrance to the cache. It was a small, well-insulated dugout, barely large enough for two, but it was salvation. As Elias secured the entrance, cutting off the furious blizzard, Anya collapsed onto the furs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They had escaped the immediate danger, but the threat still loomed. They were alive for now, but the battle was far from over. The syndicate would undoubtedly continue their hunt, and the wilderness, even in their temporary refuge, was a constant, unforgiving presence. Days turned into a brutal test of endurance in the hidden cache. The blizzard raged outside, trapping Elias and Anya in their subterranean refuge. They rationed their food, listening to the relentless roar of the wind, knowing that the syndicate, if they survived the storm, would still be out there, searching. Anya's fragmented memories of her father's map had solidified into a clear path, and the weight of that knowledge, a treasure and a curse, pressed heavily on them both. As the storm finally began to abate, replaced by a biting stillness, Elias ventured out to scout. He returned with grim news. The syndicate had found and ransacked the cabin, leaving behind a trail of destruction. But they had not followed their tracks in the blizzard. A small mercy. The immediate threat was gone for now, but the hunt for the gold and for Anya was far from over. "We can't stay here," Elias stated, his voice quiet but resolute. "They know this area now. We need to disappear." Anya nodded, her eyes meeting his. "To the valley, my father's mine." There was a new light in her eyes, not just fear, but a flicker of purpose, of reclaiming her father's legacy. Their journey was arduous, traversing treacherous terrain only Elias knew how to navigate. They faced hunger, exhaustion, and the constant paranoia of being followed. But with each step, their bond deepened. They shared stories, hopes and fears. Elias spoke of his lost family, a pain Anya understood intimately. Anya, in turn, spoke of her father, of his dreams and the injustice of his death. In the vast, silent wilderness, they found solace in each other's presence, a quiet strength that transcended the brutality of their circumstances. One frigid evening, as the last rays of sun painted the snow-capped peaks in hues of orange and violet, they reached the hidden valley. It was a secluded, breathtaking place, untouched by human greed. Elias built a small fire, its warmth a welcome contrast to the biting cold. Anya, exhausted but triumphant, looked at the untouched wilderness around them. This was where her father's dream lay, and where their new life could begin. Elias reached into his worn leather pouch, pulling out the silver ring, his mother's ring. He had carried it for years, a solitary reminder of what he had lost. Now, looking at Anya, at the woman who had brought light back into his desolate world, he knew where it truly belonged. He took her hand, her fingers still chapped and scarred from the ordeal, and gently, with a gaze full of unspoken promise, he slid the silver band onto her finger. Anya gasped, her eyes wide with surprise, then filled with unshed tears. The ring fit perfectly. It was a silent vow, a symbol of trust, of a future they would forge together in this harsh, beautiful land. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, purple shadows across the snow. The past was a brutal memory, the future an uncertain path. But as Anya looked at Elias, a sense of peace settled over her. They had faced death, outrun their pursuers, and found something profound in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. This was their new beginning. If you've enjoyed this tale of survival and connection in the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories. Your support helps us bring these incredible narratives to life.